If you stick a stock of liquor in your locker, it is slick to put a lock upon your stock. Or some joker who is quicker is going to trick you of your liquor. Though you snicker, you'll feel sicker from the shock. Be a piker, though your club mates mock and bicker, for like brokers round a ticker, they will flock to your locker full of liquor, and your stock will vanish quicker if you fail to lock your liquor with a lock. That's a misreading of that poem. And I'll explain in a minute or two what we're doing here. But that poem really should be read like this. If you stick a stock of liquor in your locker, it is slick to put a lock upon your stock, or some joker who is quicker is going to trick you of your liquor. Though you snicker, you'll feel sicker from the shock. Be a piker, though your club mates mock and bicker, for like brokers round a ticker they will flock, and your stock will vanish quicker if you fail to lock your liquor with a lock. Reason I'm sitting on this stool reading these lines is because a friend of mine and I decided that since we both love poetry a good deal, that maybe we could share that love with you people out there. Not going to be a course in literature. It's going to be more or less the unveiling of a love affair. Things that we have come to know and love and sometimes even become inspired by. We'll pass them along with a little bit of an explanation that might help deepen and broaden your interpretation of the poems that you encounter. One of the things I'd like to do is to talk about the job of the poet. You know, he's not doing, or she is not doing what he or she does in order to make your life miserable. He or she is submitting a poem for your enjoyment, simply for that, for your enjoyment. Sometimes that enjoyment can be laughter. Sometimes that enjoyment can be manifest in tears. As an example of one of the tools a poet uses is the economy of language. Poets tend to say a lot in a little. Narrators of novels can be verbose, can go on, but poets tend to like to get the job done as quickly as possible. As an example of this, kind of a ridiculous example, but an example of this is a poem entitled Lines on the Antiquity of Microbes. Lines on the Antiquity of Microbes. Adam had 'em. That's it. Adam had 'em. 4 syllables. What need more be said? Adam had 'em. That's how antiquated they are. There are all kinds of gimmicks and devices that the poet uses in order to intensify the experience. A lot of people tell me they don't care for poetry because they see it as nothing but sweetness and flowers and frilliness and gentleness. And that's not true. In order to illustrate my position that poetry is something more than simply sweetness and flowers and lace and what have you, I selected a poem by Randall Jarrell entitled The Death of the Ball Turret Gunner. From my mother's womb I fell into the state, and I hunched in its belly till my wet fur froze. 6 miles from earth, loosed from its dream of life, I woke to black flak and the nightmare fighters. When I died, they washed me out of the turret with a hose. You can't really read that poem and think that poetry is nothing but roses and violets and sweetness and lace. That's a poet looking right into the horror of a military death. It's long been a favorite of mine, and I hope it might become one of yours as well. The Title again is The Death of the Ball Turret Gunner, and the poet is Randall Jarrell. There are other poems that I've selected that illustrate some of the tools of the poet. Meter comes to mind, the metrical pattern that a poet imposes on himself. No one puts a gun to the poet's head and says, you must write in iambic pentameter or trochaic hexameter. Poets choose to do this because they find that it gives their poem a certain substance that would lack without that structure. There's a poem, a limerick, which is a very, very widely known metrical pattern that helps to illustrate it. It's called There Was a Young Man from Japan. There was a young man from Japan whose limericks never would scan. When they said it was so, he replied, yes, I know, but I always try to get as many words into the last line as ever I possibly can. So you can see by violating the metrical pattern that everybody's familiar with, it makes it more emphatic and more understandable. In future programs, I'd like to share with you some of my favorite poems. Maybe by then you will have written in and suggested that we either shut the thing down or continue with the flourish. And while you're doing that, you might even want to suggest some poems that you'd like us to read while we're doing this kind of thing. I think next time we get together, I'd like to read a series of 4 sonnets. Sonnet, of course, is again something that the poet imposes on, in this case, herself. It would be Edna St. Vincent Millay, a series of sonnets from the Epitaph for the Race of Man. The title alone is kind of poetic. Think about that between now and then, if you want. Epitaph for the Race of Man. When we're gone, either because we destroyed ourselves or nature destroyed us or whatever, what's going to be written on our headstone? What can you write about the race of man that is epitaph-like, something that we might be proud of? Chew on that, and I'll see you back in Grandpa's shop the next time. Bye-bye.